Well, I just got done telling another legendary story. So if you're here for the UFC and you have not checked out my stories file, I would highly suggest that playlist, because I don't know if there are going to be very many people who love UFC who don't love listening to stories like that. So give it a look. But right now, what I'm going to talk about is GSP versus Khabib, because, like I said, if this Jorge Masvidal and Conor thing is real, that probably means that Khabib is going to fight GSP. Or Khabib's going to fight Tony or Gaethje, but I have a hard time believing that Dana is going to do that, to be honest with you. I think the only way that Conor is not fighting Khabib next is if GSP is fighting Khabib, being that I'm hearing, talk about that potentially happening. So let's talk about that fight. What do we think would happen? There's a lot to unpack there. First thing to unpack, what weight class are they going to fight at? Because last time GSP fought, he fought at 185, right? Obviously, his entire career is at 170, and I would imagine that Khabib would, go up to 170 or at a catch weight. I can't imagine GSP going down to 155. Unless I'm forgetting, I don't think he ever went down to lightweight. He fought Matt Hughes, he fought BJ Penn and all that, but unless I'm mistaken, all that was at 170. But either way, that fight, those two guys are going to figure out a weight to make that fight happen, because that is a super fight. That's a legacy fight, and they'll make a fortune, both of them. Right? So first off, before I dive into X's and O's, which is like the most boring part, you can go watch the Weasel for that, because he'll do a much better job than me. But one thing I will dive into is this. Okay, what can you take from the last time GSP fought? Because first of all, GSP fought in 2017 against Michael Bisping, came back after a 4-year layoff, I believe, and won the 185-pound belt, and then just didn't fight again. So in the last 7 years or so, he's fought once, but he won, and he won the middleweight championship. Now, let's unpack that a little bit, though, okay? Because he came back to fight Bisping because he was very familiar with Bisping. They had trained together, and I think he knew that Bisping was a fight that he had tremendous advantages in, right? And Bisping is like, oh, that's a big risk fight? I don't think it's necessarily a bigger risk than Robert Whittaker, Yoel Romero, another Luke Rockhold fight. Like, he had a murderer's row waiting to take a shot at that belt, and GSP was by far the biggest payday, so of course he's going to take that fight. I actually thought he handled that masterfully, the way that he ended up with that GSP fight. But the bottom line is this. Fighting Bisping at 185 pounds has absolutely no relevance whatsoever to fighting Khabib at, call it, 170. Let's say, even if Khabib comes up to welterweight, that fight is irrelevant, like fundamentally irrelevant. It's about as relevant as Conor beating Cowboy when you're trying to break down Conor versus Khabib. Like just as it relates to their strengths and weaknesses. Oh, Conor beat Cowboy? Well, I guess that means absolutely nothing as it relates to him fighting Khabib next. Like, literally nothing. So GSP beating Bisping means absolutely nothing as it relates to Khabib. So you got to go back in his career. Now, here's the only thing about that fight that plays into this one, which is that his skills seem to still be there from a wrestling perspective and from, stand-up. People forget this about George, because in the later part of his career, he was so good at wrestling, and he would take guys down and just control them, elbows, ground and pound, just control them from bell to bell. But what they don't realize is GSP, when he first came into the octagon, was a karate master. But seriously, it was his stand-up that made him great. Spinning kicks, all kinds of crazy stuff. He just trained with the Canadian wrestling team and became incredible at wrestling. So, on the feet, I don't think that anyone is going to give that advantage to Khabib, because how many knockouts does Khabib have standing up? Answer: 0, right? That's the thing with Khabib. And here's another thing that I'm just going to say. This is an unpopular statement until I qualify it with information. Khabib is not a dominant 155-pound champion yet. Period. Okay? He's just not. Anybody could say, oh, Khabib, he's undefeated, but he's not a dominant champion yet at 155. These are just facts, man. He's undefeated, but what he did outside the octagon, irrelevant. You look at who he beat in the octagon, and he has some good guys on his resume. But as far as when he became the champion, he got given that belt. I mean, straight up. He was supposed to fight Tony. Tony got hurt. He fought Al Iaquinta to win the belt. Okay, well, Tony Ferguson fought Kevin Lee for an interim belt before that. Is beating Al Iaquinta any bigger an accomplishment than beating Kevin Lee? No, they're identical. Identical. So the only thing that Khabib could say as far as, you know, why he is the true belt holder over Ferguson is because Conor came back, who was the belt holder, and Khabib beat him. So, you know, Khabib is the champion for sure. But he became the champion then. And then he's defended it once against Dustin Poirier. And he has not fought Justin Gaethje or Ferguson. Okay? Dude, listen, Kamaru Usman, great champion. No one's going to call him a dominant champion yet because he hasn't fought Jorge Masvidal. Actually, he has beat Tyron Woodley and Colby Covington, though. So that's even, I mean, honestly, like, Usman is a more dominant champion than Khabib as it relates to how many challengers, like legit challengers, there are in your division that you have not fought yet. Like with Usman, he's got Gilbert Burns. That is a nightmare for him. That matchup is a nightmare. Okay, and I'll do plenty more videos about why Gilbert Burns, he's a nightmare. Now, Tyron Woodley matches up well against him. Colby and Usman are going to have serious problems with Gilbert Burns. Serious problems. The guy's a world champion Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter. World champion, okay? So the part where you press people against the fence, take them down and control them, say bye-bye to that strategy. So now it's like, all right, well, how does Gilbert Burns look on his feet versus how you guys look on your feet? He looked kill mode against Damian Maia. He flat backed him like a, you know, like he's got titanic power. If Colby wants to stand in front of him and do the high volume thing, listen, I don't know. I mean, you don't have any idea how someone's going to react to that. I mean, listen, like I thought Robbie Lawler would eventually catch Colby, and Colby just completely nullified Lawler completely by just volume. I'm talking on his feet. So maybe that'll work against Gilbert. But Gilbert is an assassin, and, you know, Colby will have to do that the whole fight because I'm telling you, like, that guy, he's a nightmare matchup. Usman's stand-up is not as much just like, I mean, Colby literally is throwing punches 100% of the time. I mean, it just never ends. Usman's not quite as that repetitive with his strikes. Dude, I'm telling you, man, Burns is a nightmare matchup for Usman. If he beats Tyron Woodley, he might get a title shot, and I think I like him in that fight. I'm gonna be honest. Now, I think I like Tyron Woodley in the fight against Burns, but if Burns does win, I think I like him in that fight against Usman. Just purely stylistically. Usman doesn't have the output like Colby that might confuse Burns, and Usman's main tactic of taking people down, So, anyway, I just got way sidetracked, but here's the deal. Khabib has not fought Gaethje and has not fought Ferguson. Now, the fact that those two guys are fighting each other right now is actually kind of sucks because one of them may not fight Khabib, right? Like, Khabib needs to beat both those guys to be a true 155-pound, cleaned out the division champion. And obviously, there's no way he fights both those guys before he fights Conor. I mean, it will not happen. Like, most likely Conor will fight him before either of those guys, to be honest with you. But this whole, you know, Masvidal Conor thing is throwing, I mean, who knows? I don't know. I mean, listen, the more I thought about it, the worse idea I think the Conor and Masvidal fight is right now, because I think Masvidal has a legit chance of beating Kamaru Usman. And can you imagine if the Conor McGregor versus Masvidal fight is for the 170-pound belt? Oh, like, it would be bananas. And I think that, let's say Masvidal loses to Usman, I think if he fought Conor next, the pay-per-view is identical size to what it's going to be right now, right? Like, you're not going to lose any pay-per-views if Usman beats Masvidal. But if Masvidal beats Usman and then Conor fights Masvidal, oh my god, can you imagine that? The problem is that Conor needs someone to fight, right? It looks like Dana's not gonna just get, like, apparently Khabib can fight in July, and it sounds like this is kind of when they're targeting him and Jorge Masvidal for July. And they must be looking at doing it sooner, because if Conor was just gonna fight someone in July, I think it would be Khabib. But anyway, back to Khabib and GSP. The bottom line is Khabib has used the same tactic to beat every single fighter And he's not going to be able to do that against GSP, period. I mean, they're certainly not going to be dominant at it the way that he is with other people. So at the very least, that is one of the toughest fights the toughest matchups that you could have for Khabib. But at the same time, we don't know what GSP is going to come. You know what I mean? Like I'm comparing him to 2013 GSP. I mean, that's a long time, man. That's a long time. Skills probably are still there, but Khabib in his prime, you got to go with Khabib. I mean, you have to. It's just too much time. And beating Bisping, that does not count enough to where you can realistically just go, oh, okay, cool, yeah. You know, GSP's going to come in and just run through Khabib, like as if 7 years off doesn't matter. Like and you're fighting the most dominant fighter in the UFC right now. I just said he's not dominant, but I mean, he is dominant. He ran through Dustin Poirier, but my point is he has to beat Tony, Gaethje, and then he has to beat Conor again too. I mean, bottom line, Conor is a big enough star that he has earned that. Like, you have to beat him twice, especially if he says he was partying his face off and his behavior was very clear that was happening. He was not focused. He was doing, you know, most guys, they're like, listen, I was partying and I wasn't focused. You know how quick everyone is to tell them to go fuck themselves? Listen, I was hooked on pills. I was drinking. Listen, I had a cocaine problem. No one gives any credence to that, right? Conor, they're like, you didn't get the best Conor. You're gonna have to beat the best Conor. That's the level of superstar that Conor is, which is awesome because I fucking love Conor. And I agree with that, actually. I think that if Conor gets focused and he beats Khabib in the rematch, I think that we are watching the modern day Muhammad Ali. Like, I think that 50 years from now, like, if Conor can hold it together, if he can hold it together, this is Muhammad Ali, and we're watching it, and everybody should just get on board. I'm actually not going to go too deep in that because I'm going to make a whole other video about that literally right now because I'm feeling pretty inspired about that. Bottom line, though, is the more that I talk this through, the less I feel like anyone can predict the GSP versus Khabib fight because it's impossible. It's impossible. GSP's been off for too long. It's impossible. I'd be very excited to watch it, though. Much less excited than I would be to watch Khabib fight Ferguson, though, or Gaethje. Okay. So the only reason that I really want Gaethje to win this fight against Ferguson is because I've always said that Gaethje would beat Khabib because stylistically it is the worst possible matchup for Khabib. I want to be proven right because no one's going to pick Gaethje and I am. And then if I'm right, I'll be like, oh, geez, let's go back to my TikTok from February, the first time I brought it up, before Dustin Poirier said it. Who's the man now? Who is the man? Anyway, this video was all over the place, but still good information. So like my channel, subscribe, tell your friends, forward the content. If you guys forward this to people, that's YouTube's like, oh shit, Jesse's bringing people onto the platform. That would be very helpful and I genuinely would appreciate it. So like the channel, subscribe, comment, forward. Let's go.